Welcome to FS Brew. FS Brew is the region's first podcast focusing on all things insurance and Insurtech in the UAE and the broader Middle East. I am Ranjit Philip. I work with a boutique consulting firm where I work on M&A, funding, and go-to-market support for startups and tech companies.
Hi, I'm Vidya. I'm the founder of Forward, a startup that works with insurance companies to build their go-to-market digital propositions. In today's episode, we have with us Shady El Tohfa. He is the co-founder and CEO of Amenli. Previously, he was the chief commercial officer of Paymob. Amanle is an Egyptian digital broker that recently raised about $1 million. It is one of the early insurtechs that was set up in the country in a space which has been traditionally served by typical insurance players with a very disjointed CX strategy. So it was a very interesting conversation to have with him about the market and the mindset of a startup, insurtech startup. I hope you enjoy listening in. Hi, Shady. Welcome to FS Brew. It is so great to have you with us today.
Hi, Vidya. Thank you for having me. Hi, Ranjit.
Hi.
Wonderful. Shady, so we always kickstart our interviews with this question. We ask all our guests, why insurance? How did you get into this career? Tell us more about it.
It's a very long story. It started in 2016. So before I started Amenli, I was at Paymob. So I joined Paymob in 2015. I was part of the founding team. I joined early there. I was very lucky. And while I was at Paymob, I spent there more than 5 years. But 2016, 2017, I started working with microfinance companies to build them a payment solution for their loan disbursements and installment collection. And I came across micro insurance at the time that was coupled with the micro loans that those guys did. And at that time, I had no idea about insurance. I did not know anything about insurance at all. And I was really impressed by the concept of people paying like £5, £10 a month and getting coverage for 50K and so on, their life insurance and so on. So I was really interested in this product. And then I found out that the insurance penetration in Egypt is very low. And I thought like, why not everyone has this insurance or those kinds of insurance? And I did not really understand the difference between micro and conventional or anything like that. So this is when I started building interest actually in insurance. So I spent 16, 17 reading about the Bima in Africa and how they were like expanding with micro insurance, with the partnerships with the mobile network operators and so on. And Mkopa in Tanzania at the time, they had those boxes with the solar panels and the radios of the TVs with the mobile phones. And then when they started having a big base of, I think they reached 400K customers, they started trying to get into insurance at the time, crop insurance and so on, because they had all this weather data. So I was really fascinated with those solutions at the time. Then this is what got me started wanting to know more about insurance and understanding how those things work. And then Lemonade 17, I think at the time, they started exploding and everyone was talking about them and what they're doing. And by 2018, I took the decision that I wanted to do something in Insurtech after Paymob. And I didn't know exactly like when that would be, if it was going to be like 10 years after or 1 year after. Until 2020 came and there was this opportunity that there was a brokerage license, an insurance brokerage license that was available. And with an angel investor, our first angel investor who had this license. And then I knew him before that and we were talking about it and so on. And then a few months after we decided that we agreed actually that he will give us the company and the license and will give us seed investment as well, an angel ticket. At the time was August 2020, right? In the middle of the peak of COVID.
Yeah.
And at the time also our thoughts had changed about how can we start an insurance. So it was at the beginning, I was interested in micro. And then throughout the time, I discovered that micro is very challenging. And also we discovered that there is a huge opportunity in Egypt in conventional insurance. So this is how we got into insurance and how I personally actually got interested into insurance and get to start Amenli.
Very good, Shadi. I think you've covered a little bit of the next question that I was going to ask you as well. But Please do tell us, what does Amenli stand for? That's an interesting thing to know.
It's an Arabic word. It's called, it means insure, not insure me, but insure for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
see.
it's an Arabic word, yes. Yes.
Perfect. And you mentioned how you got the idea and learned a little bit about the industry and then inspired by Lemonade, and a bit fortunate that you had this angel investor who had a license available and was ready to seed fund as well. Do you have a founding team? I assume you have co-founders.
Was. Yeah.
So how did you get together with them? What is that founding story like?
It's a very interesting story. I have two co-founders, Adham and Omar. Adham is the CTO and Omar is the Chief Commercial Officer. And when I started thinking about starting Amenli, I had to look for co-founders. I wouldn't have done it as a single founder. I think those are very different people, that the humans, in my opinion. But what happened at the time is that I had a friend at Paymob who was also part of the founding team of Paymob, who was the tech lead of the main Paymob product, which is the payment gateway. And we worked together at Paymob for 3 years. And he left Paymob before I did, like 1 year before I did. And I always had in my mind that if I'm going to do something, I'd call Adham to become my co-founder and CTO. So this is on Adham. And I knew that I needed to get Adham on board because obviously I know nothing about tech, and I knew that if I was going to make it, I need to get someone that I trust, that I know very well, that I worked with for a long time. And this was, for me, was very important milestone, is to convince Adham actually to join.
Yeah.
And this was a very fun journey. And at the same time, I remember before starting Amenli, I was talking to one of my friends and someone that I worked with, Paymob, we were on the same team, and he knew me very well. We worked together for 2 years, close to 2 years at Paymob. So he told me, like, if you're going to start something, you need Omar Ez with you. And I told him, like, who's Omar Ez? And he told me, like, this is a friend that I worked with before, and he has all the things that you lack. So he told me, like, you need to get this guy on board because I know what you can do and what you cannot do. So I started talking to Ez as well. I remember that because we didn't know each other before that time. So I remember that we had maybe 20 meetings or 20 sittings where we would go hang out together, talk about what we want to do. And I had to convince him about insurance in the beginning because he also did not have any idea about insurance like me before, and everyone else actually. And I think in Egypt that's from outside of the sector.
Yeah.
So it was very important to get those guys with me because, as I said, and I believe in that, is
It looks like. Absolutely. So that's the founding story. Tell us, Shari, how did you then get your first 100 customers? What are the specific tactics that you employed to make sure that you got that first 100, which is always the most difficult one to get?
Yeah, that was a tough time. So I think what we did in the beginning was that we had the hypothesis of that people needed insurance, which was something that was challenged from a lot of people at the time. When I talked to people that I'm going to leave Paymob, and Paymob was taking off at the time, right? So Paymob is huge today, but at the time it was really starting to take off. So I remember that in 2020, we knew what was coming. We were preparing for it. And I know that it was like a rocket ship. So I had to jump off and start something new in insurance, not in payments. That was not maybe popular, maybe, or as trendy as it is today, not very known. Insurtech as a term was not known in our region as much. So it was very tough. But the premise that we wanted that made a start was that people needed insurance, but they did not maybe know that they can buy it or know that it can be easy to be bought and so on. And we needed to validate. So when we started, while Adham was working on building the solution, we needed to validate that so that we make sure that we're not going for something that's not going to work. So basically what we've done is that I remember that we were 3 salespeople and ourselves, and we made very simple Facebook campaigns, like lead forms. Like, we did not have technology. There was no solution. There was nothing. Adham was still working on that. And we made those campaigns and we got like those leads and we called them on the phone and we closed them and everything was completely manual. And we kept doing this for a few months actually until Adham was done with building our MVP. And at the same time, we also were working on our regulatory approvals for building our online experience for distributing insurance. So it was really, it wasn't even an MVP. It was very simple. So we tried to validate and it was great success actually. And everyone was telling us that you cannot get people on the phone and close selling policies with them on the phone because in Egypt specifically, it's everywhere else. It's insurance distribution is based on face-to-face interaction between sales agents and people and so on. So the first thing that we started with was having those phone calls. Everyone was saying that it's going to fail. And we wanted to make sure that it's not just that we're getting the first 100 customers, but it's that we can actually close and sell policies and close those deals without meeting those customers and then working on the MVP as we go. So that was the first thing that we do. Very simple. I know it's nothing fancy or not a very exciting story, but this is
an idea
actually.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Very similar story that Avinash told us from insurance market right here as well. Facebook was the common thread. So you're on the right track with that one. Now, you spoke a lot about the co-founders, and we know from experience that co-founder relationship is quite critical for startups. And a lot of failures happen if co-founders break apart. 2 questions from me. How did you agree on what will be the roles? More importantly, how will you agree that you will give them space to operate, and how will you handle conflicts? That's an interesting thing to know.
So this is a very important question. I think trust is one thing that is very important between co-founders and between the team in general, but co-founders specifically it's very important that we trust each other. And it's very important also that, and I know that this sounds very cliche, but the skill set that we have is complementary to each other. So if, for example, if we're all good at similar things, it makes it very difficult to draw the line between the roles, for example, as you said.
Yeah.
So if, for example, overlap with Adham would be very difficult. But for me and Az, for example, because we're both on the business side, if we're both very good at sales or very good at commercial on the commercial side of the business or very good at operations, building operations and so on, it would be very good at fundraising would be very difficult for us to draw the line there. But I think what helped us there is that the 3 of us were very different characters, even like personally, we're very different characters. We share the same values, which is super important. And this is, I think, the main thing is that we share the same values. If you put the 3 of us in the same situation, most probably we'll take very similar decisions. Could be very different in terms of how we go about things, but what we want to achieve or what we want to get to in the end will be the same thing. So I think this is very important in terms of how we agree on things and how we manage conflict and so on. And also that we can actually debate. It's not very healthy that as the CEO, for example, I have my co-founders with me and they agree on everything that I say. And this is very far from truth in our case. But it's also very important to understand that we're in the room right now and we're discussing something and everyone can debate and we can have conflicts inside the room. But at the end, if we reach a certain decision and if we reach a certain conclusion, and it could be like my opinion or Omar's opinion or Adam's opinion or anyone else on the management team as well, because it's not just close to co-founders, right? We know that if we took one decision, everyone would back it up and we'll get out of the room knowing that this is something that we all agree to be doing right. And if it fails, we get back and we do the other thing and so on. So it's very important to know how to handle those debates and handle those disagreements and know that this is nothing personal and that everyone is trying to make the best decision for the business itself.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And from other founders that I've heard, one of the key things that they say is we should all know how to fight fairly.
Exactly.
That's very important. Yeah.
Exactly. I'll use that statement after the phrases.
Sure.
Summarizes it very good.
Nice. Wonderful. So, Shadi, getting on to the next question from my side. You mentioned now Amanle is focusing more on the conventional side of products. Tell us a little more about that whole business model for Amanle itself. Amanle is a great example of homegrown brand from Egypt. Tell us what are the different components that went in when you moved away from that sort of nascent Facebook campaign style, basic style that you said, a full blown with a tech stack. What are the components that form that business is today?
What we are is we are a broker, right? We are a digital broker. So our business model is very simple. We sign contracts with all the insurance companies and we sell the products to customers and we take a commission. What we've been trying to do is that we've been trying to crack the retail side of the business, either selling insurance to individuals or to SMEs. Very recently, we started with consumers first, and then we start getting into SMEs at a certain stage. What we tried to do is that we tried to understand how can we build very strong distribution, because the problems or the issues or the challenges that we were trying to solve are mainly like accessibility, that is very related to how insurance is being distributed on one side. And on the other side, you have the relevancy of the products, of the insurance policies themselves, the covers that we're selling, and the relevancy to the segments that we're serving. And the last piece is the customer experience. What we've built as a product, or what we've built at Amanle, is technology that helped us solve those three issues. For example, what we've done is that we started with the Facebook campaigns and people calling on the phone. But this was, and this did not really change drastically today if you look at it from the outside. But what had changed is that we said that we want to make sure that we have this right balance between digital experience and offline also experience that people usually need to buy insurance in our markets. And how can we make use of technology to make this much more efficient than it is today? For example, what we started with was that we've built a platform that manages. So we built, of course, the interface where customers can get in and choose the type of insurance they want, answer a few questions and get instant codes for the insurance. It's not a comparison experience. Like, we do not list each and every policy in the market, but what we do is that we take the answers of those questions and we blend them now with some other data points so that we can recommend the best three options for each customer. So this is, for example, a tweak that we had to do so that we can make it easier better for us to acquire more customers and easier for the customers as well, because we know that the mid-income segment that we're targeting, most segments actually are not very insurance savvy. So the comparison, maybe experience that you'd find in the UK or in Europe or the US might not be the best for Egypt, because people cannot really go through 20 options and make and understand the differences. So we knew that we had to make the options limited, but at the same time, we need to have a recommendation engine that makes it personalized for each and every customer, for example. So we put a lot of effort and we put a lot of investment from the technology perspective in the piece of the experience or the piece of the platform. And on the other side, we knew that there needs to be a human element in the experience. There needs to be a human touch, right? But we wanted to minimize that. So we started working on technology. We call it internally the internal tools. So most of actually the investment on the technology that we do is actually directed towards our internal tools and how can we increase efficiency from the back end. For example, we have a call center, people that call people on the phone, call them back to close the sale. So the customers go through the website, through a digital experience until they find the prices. They can, of course, go on and pay for it and complete the experience digitally. Nobody is comfortable paying like $350 for an insurance policy without talking to someone. So we started building a lot of to streamline this whole online to offline to online experience and increase the capacity of the team so that the human element that is there is actually not a bottleneck, let's say. And this was our big objective for the first maybe more than 2 years of our operations, is the conversion. How can we increase conversion? How can we get more customers? How can we balance this online, offline piece to make sure that we're not building the most fancy experience and an app that has a chatbot and everything that's really technologically attractive or fancy.
Yeah.
We're losing all the customers we didn't want to lose all customers because we want to build something that satisfies our ego in terms of building something fancy on the tech side. So this was the most challenging actually part also of business.
No, sure. Absolutely. It has to be right for the customer base there, right? And talking about the customer base, it's obviously one of the largest in population in, let's say, MENA region. And as you mentioned, fairly low insurance penetration, sub 1%, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think other than third-party liability insurance is really not compulsory. You might correct me if I'm wrong.
Third party, the TPL policies, the third party liability policies for the car insurance are compulsory, but nothing else.
Yeah.
At least for the consumer.
Absolutely. So I presume that there is an awareness issue in terms of why is insurance required, stuff like that. So what do you do in terms of breaking that status quo of low awareness? We would love to know that.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of few things. So awareness is definitely part of it. But remember that we have a huge population. So some people are aware of insurance that you can start off with. Right? And what we've done is that we've seen that awareness is a huge issue. And awareness is a huge issue. It is more of an issue in the lower income segments for the micro insurance, for example. And this is why it becomes very challenging, very expensive to build a micro insurance business, because cost of acquisition usually becomes very high because of the education piece, which is also required for mid-income segment, but not to the same extent. The other challenges that comes into play that contributed to the low penetration, as you said, in the market in Egypt, is also the accessibility. So it could take you in Egypt for you to buy medical insurance. For example, if you want to buy medical insurance for yourself or your family, it could take you 3 to 6 weeks to buy this insurance. Maybe 1 to 2 weeks just to get pricing, because you need to get to an insurance company or find a broker that would get you a few offers. And usually if you go to an insurance company, you get one offer. So you need to go to more than one. It could take you a very long time.
Wow.
And it takes you a very long time. It's not because the insurance companies are doing a bad job. It's because the insurance companies for the past 100 years in Egypt have been focusing on B2B insurance. So they've been focusing on insurance for the big corporates, the business that brings them hundreds of millions in revenues. And when you look at how the retail insurance is treated, it's treated the same way. So face-to-face also sales, where you're depending on brokers or sales agents to acquire those customers and generate the leads and do everything. So the capacity of those guys, they have 10 hours a day, for example, to work. So they have to make sure that they're optimizing. So it's either that they focus on the big companies that gives them millions in premiums, and hence more revenues, and hence more commissions and more income for the salespeople as well, which is very smart. Or they would focus with someone like me that would pay them, for example, 10K of premium, and they get a few hundreds in commission. And so this is the problem with the market, really. So accessibility on one side is an issue, product relevancy as well, because the insurance companies did not have the tools to access the mid-income segments or to serve a huge base of retail customers, because cost of serving is very high. Also, capacity is an issue. They did not really build enough products that are relevant to different segments. Yeah. So maybe products that were there in the market when we started, it was a challenge because most of the products were built for the high income segments. Right. So we had to go and scout for products. We had to go and talk to insurance companies about tweaking the products, maybe changing some of the products, maybe building some other products to be able to talk to the segments that we talk to that are not maybe penetrated today. And the thing is that everybody understands that the concept of insurance. So everybody understands that I'm paying a premium, a small amount, so that if something bad happens, in the insurance companies will pay the big money and be like saving with them for some time. And in return, they would pay me this money for the claims if I had an accident or someone gets sick or something like that. So everybody understands this. the details of the policy and everything else around it, of course, nobody understands. We're not very ambitious that everyone will understand it. We're just trying to capitalize on what the customers know today, and we're trying to make it easy for them to get the quote so that they understand like how much does it cost them to buy insurance, for example. This is one of the biggest challenges in the market, because the general perception, for example, is that insurance is very expensive, which is not true. And a lot of people would say that we never knew that we could buy medical insurance, for example, that cheap. We thought that it's something very expensive because the perceived value is very high.
Got it. Understood. Perfect. Thank you.
There are lots of misconceptions about insurance sector. I don't know why, because it's expensive. Apparently, we make a lot of money. Apparently, we don't pay a lot of claims, which is all not so true, actually. But yeah, so this is where a startup can come in, be nimble, and really find ways to build access and distribution. You mentioned just a while back, Shadi, about having to convince incumbent insurers to come on board and build maybe a product that's a lot more accessible. Tell us about Lee's journey around that. Well, is it very challenging, or is it super easy? How does it work out for you, especially when you have to build specific product proposition or something very innovative?
So it was very challenging at the beginning. So when we started, and it was for a good reason, nobody knew us coming from outside of the sector. So people were very skeptical in the beginning. The insurance companies were very skeptical of us in the beginning, especially that also retail was something that they struggled with for maybe 5 or 6 years before we came in as well. So they really had doubts about if we can crack it. So this was a huge challenge for us when we started. And I think it became easier and easier as we went along with them and we worked with some of them. And I think the key things is also building a strong relationship that's based on delivering results. So what we've done is that we did not really go to insurance companies and tell them that we want to change those products and build a very innovative products from the beginning. When we started with them, we went and we said that we want the products that you have already and you cannot sell. So I remember one of the insurance companies, they had this medical insurance product and they had it in the drawer and they not sell it actually and did not give it to any brokers. And this product is not good. It's not going to sell. And we were actually looking for this product because it's a low premium, low cover. It's very fit for a certain segment. And we told them like, you know what, just try us, give this product to, and we'll see what we can do with it. You're not going to build anything. You're not going to invest anything. You have the product already. So we'll try with it. We took this product and fast forward 3 years. Today, this is our best selling medical insurance product. And we contribute more than 60% of the sales of this insurance company for that product. Because of course, when we started selling it, they started getting it out to other brokers as well. So I think when we start with those companies and they see results and they see growth, and as I said, like the key point is that we did not really go and tell them that we want to change everything that you guys do. We started with what we have. We started like showing some results, and then we started moving to now building products with those companies and innovating on some other products and building some offerings that maybe are not very conventional for them and so on. But it was all built on the relationship that we built maybe for some time in the beginning. Also, it's very maybe technical, but also they've seen how our portfolio is performing on loss ratio, for example. This is very important from an insurance point of view. And insurers will always look at that. Maybe brokers do not always look at that, especially in the beginning. But we wanted actually to make sure that the products that we're selling to the insurance companies are making them profits as well, because those are our suppliers. So we need to make sure that the supplier is happy so that we can continue what we're doing. So they've seen that we cared about those things. It's not just that we wanted them to work on stuff that we wanted and we wanted to always experiment with new stuff and so on. I'm not really looking on what's in it for that. So we needed to align our interests together first and then start building this relationship over time.
Got it. Perfect. No, I think that's a story that most insurtechs forget, that you have to help the incumbents achieve their business goals, right? So that's
100%.
Now let's shift a little bit to distribution. Now, obviously, you are a digital broker with a broking license with digital front end. You don't want to have too many face-to-face interactions. You have phone calls in place of face-to-face meetings because they're not scalable. But if you look at, let's say, other ways of distribution, first of all, I would like to know if they are allowed as per the regulatory regime. We hear a lot about embedded insurance, and as a consequence, we from the olden days of insurance used to call it affinity partnership. Like we used to have number of these partnerships with dealerships. So I remember in my days, we used to have with Toyota, where we used to do products through motor insurance products. So do you, first of all, are you allowed to do those kind of partnerships? And if so, are you pursuing any? What is your strategy on those partnerships?
So I think the good thing about, I think we were very lucky with the timing when we started Amenli, because at the time the fintech space was really running. So payments was already there. And remember, BNPL was also like 2-3 years in, and it was exploding. A lot of fintech models or a lot of sectors within the fintech space were really booming. And insurance was maybe lagging behind. And the regulator in Egypt, the Financial Regulatory Authority that regulates all the non-bank financial services, they had some of those sectors already working. And they've seen this boom happening, and they've seen how technology helps actually with those sectors. So I think we were very lucky to come at this stage and tell them that we wanted to do the same thing with insurance. So there was a lot of maybe flexibility from a regulatory perspective, from the regulator side, to take in what we wanted to do. And since the beginning, from the B2C model that we had, also a lot of the things that we were doing were actually outside of the against regulations, actually. And we had to take special approvals for all the things that we did. And also it was built on delivering results. So we started bit by bit, and we started delivering results. So they started building trust in us, and we started getting into other things. So when we got into distribution partnerships, we started working on different models. So you have the embedded model, and you have the affinity model, which is maybe the referral model where you have a B2B2C. So you're selling standalone insurance products that is not necessarily embedded within a service or a product. So we like to differentiate between those two things. But what we've done is that the regulations were not there, but we talked to the regulator about them, and we took approvals for those models. What was great actually was that, as I said, we came at a time that they were very ready. There was a readiness on their side. They were very ready to listen, and we proposed models. And of course, we had to change a few things and build those models with them. And we took the approvals for those models. We have now a number of actually distribution partnerships, either embedded or cross-sell B2B2C, or the affinity kind of model that are live. And we're working on a few big things that are coming out in the next few weeks. So this is something, a big part of our strategy for the next phase, actually.
Sure. And this is, I'm assuming, multiple products, right? It's not just motor.
Yeah. So on the D2C, it's for us, because the economics on the D2C are very different. So we focused on the high value products, the motor insurance and the medical insurance when we started, because this is where you can afford like acquiring customers and so on. So the unit economics for us was very important, because this is one of the things that had caused a lot of challenges for Insurtech plays across the world, actually. So we wanted to focus on that. So on the D2C, we only do those products and the high value products, and we make sure that the unit economics work. The good thing about the B2B2C is that you have much more favorable economics you can put there. So we get into other products. So we get into life products, for example, like credit life, default risk, other things. And we got into gadget insurance. We got into micro insurance, accidental covers, income protection covers, and so on. So we started getting into those things for the B2B2C, or for the distribution partnerships, specifically embedded and B2B2C. And we tried to avoid having the offline component for the micro products, of course, because of the economics as well. So this is how we started getting it. But we started getting into that maybe later, at a later stage compared to the D2C, because we knew that this needs a lot of time building, and it needs a lot of experimenting as well.
Yeah.
So we knew that if we only started with the distribution partnerships, it could take us a very long time, and maybe it could threaten our existence. So we wanted the D2C, where we have full control. First, build a solid business, and under the hood, we were for 2 years building for the B2B2C and for the embedded model, for the embedded insurance model. But of course, it takes time to start the engine, as they call it, but then you can accelerate very fast. So there is like a turning point that I think we're very close to today.
Yeah, sure.
I think in the panel that Shadi and I were in, I think he mentioned about how for one of the very key partners, it took almost 2 years for you to go live, isn't it? Yeah.
It's very, very tricky with that. So this is why, because we had actually a lot of discussions internally and with our investors about building, like actually making the business more skewed towards B2B2C or the embedded insurance model. And honestly, most of the things that I'm saying right now and most of the things that we did in the business, we've actually took from other insurtechs. So I think since we started, we spoke to more than 15, 20 insurtechs across the globe. So Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa, Europe, US. And we always tried to we took a lot of things from those. So we took a lot of shortcuts. As I said, embedded and B2B2C, we knew that it would be tricky to start with. So we wanted to make sure that we have a 2-speed strategy where we have the D2C and then we work on the embedded, and so that we can balance between both and not have some like concentration risk at the same time and so on. And also both can serve each other very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just speaking of that itself, tell us some of the trends that Amanle is catching on to and following and working on, because there are a number of trends that are shaping the industry, especially in the MENA region. When you look at health, there's wearable-based health insurance. When you look at motor, there is pay-as-you-go. Then, of course, you have the VFoxes of the world here through Shori. And so what are you looking at in terms of trends, and what are you guys doing around those?
This is a very tricky question. I think in the context of the Egyptian market, we try to focus more on the distribution. So for example, if you look at health, for example, and having wearables getting into the health space, and how can this affect underwriting health policies, and how can this affect underwriting performance of health insurance policies and so on. For us in Egypt, and I think in most emerging markets, this could be maybe a stage where we can get to if we get to certain levels of penetration. But today, if we focus on those things, and this could take away from our focus on distribution. And if you do not have distribution, it might not mean a lot to innovate on the product itself, on the insurance cover itself, on the underwriting itself.
Yeah.
If it's like an 80-20 rule, 80% of our focus today on the innovation and on the investment is going towards distribution, because we know that this is where we need to build maybe if you wanna lay the pipes, maybe for distribution, so that you can maybe afterwards you start getting into product innovation and start following, like catching up with those trends. But as I said, like our focus today is how can we get into distribution. So for example, what we do is that we look at VFox and the broker model that they built after getting the underwriting license, for example. So this is something that we really like. This is the trends that we focus on more on the distribution. So we look at how did they build the broker network? What are the problems that they faced? What are the things that they excelled with? And when did they do it? They did it, for example, which stage did they actually start doing that? We look at plays in Mexico, for example, because Mexico is also a very close market to us in terms of how the dynamics work and how the market structure works. So we look at plays over there and see how they work on distribution. So we've seen people working with affinity programs like Kinsu, for example. We've seen Motosh that is building something for health insurance, very similar, innovating more on the product. So building this telemedicine combination with inpatient, with a discount card kind of thing, and how this works in a market like Mexico with the demographics in the mid-income segment, and how this helped with distribution as well. How we look at, of course, Indonesia, and you have a few plays like Pasar Police, for example, and they do embedded insurance. They started getting into other things today for a good reason. So they've been doing embedded insurance for the first 6-7 years of their life. And then they started getting into building a broker network, for example, today with getting the writing license. So I think there is no silver bullet answer for what are the things you should do today. I think GCC markets are very advanced compared to Egypt, Africa markets because of the penetration. I
Yep.
think most of the things that we're trying to look at are more on the distribution side, or the trends in insurance that we want to look at and we like to learn from or copy sometimes is more on the distribution. As I said, there are a
Yes.
lot of successful models, and the tricky part is that they can be successful for some time and then at scale they can turn into something else, and it's a very tricky space. And the tricky part about it is that everyone is moving at the same time, so it's not also very advanced in emerging markets. So
Yeah.
there is not a lot of benchmarks, especially in emerging markets, that we can look at. One of the things that we try to do is that we try to speak to people even like periodically. So we try to get back and talk to companies in Indonesia, or go back to talk to the companies in Africa and Latam and see how things had changed for them, and
Right.
we compare notes and so on. So I think this is also something very important that I think we learned a lot from, and we took a lot of shortcuts because of those conversations, to be honest.
That's good to know. And you're right. It's not about creating products for the sake of creating products. The distribution, you have to see if the market is ready to handle those products, right? So that's the key part here.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit, I think you've raised upwards of $2 million, if I'm wrong, over a period of since you're incepted. So was there a particular sort of fundraising process that you followed, and how did you go about selecting investors? We would love to know that.
So I think the process of selecting investors, of course, if we have the luxury of selecting investors, is always very similar to selecting co-founders or selecting the management team. I think values comes at the top. Very important is that you try to attract investors. Let's not say select, because it's very difficult maybe or maybe might seem very impractical, but maybe try to attract investors that you share the same values with.
Yeah.
And our process is, I don't think we have a process, but what we do is that we try to speak to investors a lot, and we try to get to know them over a period of time. So most of the investors that we got on board with, for example, so what we've done is that we raised the seed round in 21. We went to YC. At that time, we were very lucky to get into YC at that time. And we raised a $2 million round. And then we raised a $1 million round very recently in 23, summer 23. Alter Global and QIC DVP, Qatar Insurance Companies, corporate VC.
Sure.
And I think especially for this round, for the last round, which was done at a very challenging time, of course, what was key is that we've been talking to those investors for a very long time, even when we were not fundraising. So I remember that we started speaking to both of them, I think, end of 21 after joining YC. And we had those conversations over a very long period of time. We invested a lot in having those investors on board with us on the journey and see how the business had evolved over time, and how even us as a team evolved over time in terms of how we think about the business, how we think about the direction, and the conversations that we had, and how they sometimes in a healthy way influenced the direction that we're taking and so on. So this, I think, process of building relationship over time before getting into fundraising is very important, because it makes it very easy conversation when the time comes for us, we want the money now. It becomes a much easier conversation. It does not become really a conversation of pitching and the DD and so on. Of course, all those things happen.
Yeah.
But the context that those guys had on us for the year and a half before that was 100%, like 80% of the process or the reason why actually they got in. And during this process, also, you make sure that you understand also what are the values, as I said, of this and those investors, but also like what do they want to invest in? Do they want to invest in your company because of what it will look like in 3 years, and how this vision aligns with your vision as a company? Because it's very important also that you get that. And sometimes when we talk to investors and we find that those visions are not aligned and maybe they're expecting different things from us,
Right.
we start making sure that this is very clear that this is not the direction that we're going towards. And it's either that we discuss it with them, and sometimes they can influence, of course, what we do because we do not know everything. But also we need to make sure that we're eventually aligned on the direction that we want to go or go towards. So I think this is maybe very high level, our view or our idea of how we do the fundraising and how we select investors and so on.
Got it. Got it. And you mentioned YC, obviously, congrats for going through that. What was one or two key takeaways from going through that personally for you?
Personally. So I think it's, so two main things. So of course, YC gives you this halo of YC. So you get a lot of access to very strong people, very interesting people that you can get a lot of advice from. So for example, it helped us a lot in getting to have those conversations with the Insurtechs that I talked about. So some of them are YC companies and very successful Insurtechs in different places. And also some of them not YC companies, but maybe being YC at the time. And it's a halo of also, it's a halo effect that stays for 6 months and then you lose it for a little bit and then you're on your own, and it depends on if you achieved or not. But I think this is something that was very important, is getting access to advice, getting access to people that you can talk to and so on. And as I said, this helped us a lot through the past 3 years. And the other thing is, and I remember there were a lot of advice that we got through the program, of course, but I think one of them was, because we were talking about it a few days ago, is the role of the CEO. And I remember that was Dalton Caldwell was saying that someone asked what should be the role of the CEO. And he said, it's many games. So each and every month you have 2-3 mini games that you're focusing on, and then you're moving to the next mini games and so on. Because also this is my first time being a CEO of a company, or maybe a co-founder first, and then the CEO thing like evolves over time. But it was and the role of the CEO changes over time. Of course, it depends on the stage of the company and so on, and how big the company is and how big the team is and a lot of things. But I think the analogy of the mini games really stuck with me since then.
Perfect. Dalton is an amazing guy. I had a chance to listen to him when I was in the US. Perfect. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, brilliant guy.
Shadi, now switching back to the Egyptian market itself. Egypt is, I think, one of the most promising sectors from an Insurtech perspective. Yet the penetration levels are so low, so which means there's a lot of opportunity out there. Now, regulations obviously play a very critical part for any sort of change to happen, especially our sector. If you had a wish list of really positive and enabling regulations, what would that be?
The wish list is long, but I think today at this stage for us, at least if I'm talking about Amanle, I think EKYC and digital signature would something that will really change how the market looks in Egypt. And this is something that the regulator is already working on now. So we're waiting for it to happen. And we're working actually with them, with the other Insurtech players that are in the market and other fintech players that are in the market as well. So everyone is really pushing for this. So we're very happy that this is happening. But I think this is something that will change a lot of things on the market, because of course it limits in a way how can we scale the business, and it changes the dynamics of acquiring customers and so on.
Very good. As we go towards the end of the podcast, the final question is, what about the future in terms of geographic expansion? Or is Egypt big enough to service your needs and growth plans?
Egypt is big enough, of course. But Egypt is huge. I think there is a huge opportunity in Egypt insurance. But of course, we need to go to other places. I think our focus for 24 is to scale in Egypt that we have a meaningful market share. So we don't want to get to other markets before we have a very significant retail business to be one of the leading businesses, insurance, not just brokers, but in the whole sector in terms of retail distribution. And when I'm saying retail, it's consumer and SMEs, the very small businesses. So we want to reach this stage first in 2024, and we're very ambitious for 24 with, of course, all the challenges and everything. But I think we have a great opportunity that we become a market leader in Egypt when it comes to that sector or the retail segment. Going to other markets and geographical expansion is always a conversation that we're having internally. And we've been trying to, part of the conversations that we're having with all the companies that I talked about gives us an idea about what are the markets that would be a good fit for us. When we look at markets, we try to look at what we've built in Egypt works in markets where is the same market structure, let's say. So what we've built in Egypt maybe might not have value for certain markets and might have value for other markets. So we don't want to go to markets where we would need to build a different product, different platform to make sure that we have an advantage. But so what we're trying to do now is we're looking at all markets. We're looking at Africa. We're looking at North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. We're looking at GCC, of course. And we're looking outside of those regions to see what could be the opportunities for us to expand. Also, the mode of expansion can also be different. I think this is something very important today, specifically with the new state of markets and so on, is the mode of expansion. Maybe the mode of expansion was maybe a lot of startups from the region in the past 7 years. Expansion meant going to other markets, get the license, build a team, and so on. But I think now we need to become more flexible with the mode of expansion to be able to scale with the most in the most capital efficient way and so on.
And we are now coming to the much loved section of the podcast, which is the rapid fire questions. We fire a few questions and we expect answers in 60 seconds or less. If you're ready, we will set your way.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, perfect. So I'll start with a few. All right. What would you say is the sort of biggest lesson learned so far in your career?
And I think this is a very difficult question. I think one of the things that I try to do and I try to apply is that I try to building the team basically. So I think one of the biggest lessons I learned from Paymob is that the team is super important. And I think 70% of Paymob success, if not more, I don't know how to quantify that. The biggest reason why Paymob is successful today, and I've seen this firsthand, is the team and is how you build the team, how you choose the people and how you make actually, and not just how you choose the people as one of the co-founders, for example, as the CEO, but also how can you make sure that those people chose also to work at the company.
Absolutely.
That's very important. So I think this is one of the biggest lessons learned is that the team is super important.
I totally agree. All right. So now an easier question. Favorite city for travel?
This is very tricky. I like traveling like everyone else, I think, and very difficult to choose a city there. I think
let's say a few cities, few of your favorite cities.
Exactly.
Few of my favorite cities for traveling in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I really like California, Santa Cruz, which is not a very well-known city, but this is one of the cities at the top of my list. I like the south in Italy, Puglia. I like going to Dubai because I go to Dubai a lot and I have a lot of friends there.
Right.
And I like traveling in Egypt, actually. So I travel a lot in Egypt and I go to a lot of places. So I love Sinai. I go to Sinai a lot, different places there. Red Sea also.
You've given us a few. Very good. That's excellent. It was not that bad.
The thing is that I don't have favorites in general. Like I don't have favorite city, favorite color, favorites I really struggle with.
In terms of, let's say, books, blog, or podcasts or YouTube videos that you recommend a lot.
I know that the expected answer would be something related to business, but I've been interested a lot in, I've been interested in history and philosophy.
Nice.
So
Okay.
those are the things that I like to, I don't also read a lot. I listen to podcasts and I listen to audiobooks, help me a lot with that. So I listen to a lot of podcasts and YouTube channels and books that talk about history, philosophy. Yeah, those are the things I think that I'm
Any
interested in today.
any YouTube channel or podcast that pops to mind in terms of history?
No, I usually I pick random things, so it's not something like there is
Got it.
nothing specific.
On it.
Yeah,
So those are the areas that you listen.
yeah, exactly.
Any innovation that is exciting you? It can be in insurance or outside. Any tech innovation that you said, "Wow, this is great."
I think everyone is talking about AI now, of course, Gen AI and how it can change how life looks like in the next few years. So I'm really excited about that, even in our business.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things, I'll try to stick to the 60 seconds here, but I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is the small improvements that this can do to businesses, opposed to the big improvements that may be uncontrollable. So I'm very excited and really worried about it, but really excited about how this can increase efficiencies across all sectors and across different businesses and so on. I think this could be a very useful tool, but we need to be, of course, I'm not an expert also, but it seems like we need to be careful about it as well.
Absolutely, that's a great answer. And now over to Vidya.
Yes. So who's like the most inspiring entrepreneur for you?
Shadi doesn't like favorites, so
I don't have favorites.
I know.
There are, of course, a lot of people, but I think also I have a lot of favorites locally as well. So I've been lucky that I know a lot of founders and a lot of entrepreneurs in Egypt and in the region. And I think those are the ones that I try to follow a lot because they're very relevant to me, to us and my context. So there are like the first in Egypt, for example, you have the first and the second generation of startups. You have Paymob, of course, the team there, all my friends, and they're some of the people that I look up to, of course. You have Tazna, you have Swivel, you have Breakfast, and some of those people I don't know personally, to be honest, and I don't want to call names because there are a lot of people that I really look up to, and I always seek advice actually from as well.
Wonderful. Are you work from home sort of a person or work from office sort of a person?
Yeah,
Office.
I can't work at home. If I stay at home, I get distracted with a lot of things, and I like to spend time with the family. And I have a very hard time like doing that at home. So I always go to the office.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So what's the biggest risk you have ever taken?
Biggest risk. I think one of the biggest risks I've taken is starting Amanle, because of its is I think at the time I did not really realize it at the time, but looking back at it today, I think it was one of the big risks that I've taken. But as I said, this is all in. I look at it retroactively and I see that, but at the time, I did not really feel like that. But at the time, as I said, Paymob was taking off, and it was really like we spent 5 years trying to building and so on, and it was really taking off at the time. And then I jumped off and I started from the beginning. But I think this was one of the biggest risks I've taken.
very good.
Wonderful. Then finally, what's like your top priority for 2024 for Amanle?
The top priority now is for us is making sure that we have I think we're very close to having completing the team for that stage. So this is one of my top priorities now, and making sure that we get to the growth that we want to get to. So I know that profitability now is on everyone's mind, and this is the top priority for everyone and for us as well. I think we were lucky to have those investors on board because they helped us a lot through the past year and a half in preparing ourselves for that stage. And so that we can actually now focus more on growth. And this is what would lead us to profitability, so that we do not keep juggling between different metrics and KPIs. And we want to look at growth and profitability at the same time. So now we're in a very good shape when it comes to unit economics and so on. And we just need to focus now, maybe become like single-minded on growth. And this will lead us to actually profitability. So this is the hope for the 2024.
Perfect.
Nice.
Very good.
So this brings us to the end of this fabulous interview. Thank you so very much for sharing all
Thank
your
you.
insights. It's
No,
great
thank you
fun.
for the time.
Shadi, it was very good.
Yeah, absolutely.
you so
Thank you so much.